Hello and welcome to Masking for It, a podcast with a purpose, combining clinical insight with lived experience. Join us as we explore the realities of high-masking neurodivergent adults, debunk myths around autism and ADHD, and challenge outdated and harmful systems as we discuss the ways we can help neurodivergent people not just survive, but thrive. We're here so that the hidden can feel seen, the confused can find clarity, and the future can be different, because it needs to be. You can help us massively by following or subscribing, and in return, we can continue to bring you along behind the scenes with expert guests, pioneering research, and the chance to say you were a part of the change that we're creating. So, let's do this. There are a lot of reasons we need to get our head around this and go, okay, this is the progress of the DSM, which you've learned right now is very primitive, still needs work. But what can we learn from what you're both seeing in clinic? And I suppose, how do you both translate? Because there must be some translation going on from DSM setting out what these things are for you, but then you also know what you're seeing in front of you. And it's what's that process, I suppose, of when you get somebody in, and the balancing act, I suppose, you're having to do.
I think it's asking the right questions a lot of the time, because I think, if you think about one of the symptoms that perhaps we'll go into in a bit, so lining things up, for example, really stereotypically lining trains up, people go, oh yeah, that's what autistic boys do. But for girls, it might be arranging your sweets in colours before you eat them, or it might be needing your books to be like just so on your shelf, or your makeup to be arranged in a particular way.
Yeah, I was going to say that about makeup, that we've had a lot recently, haven't we, of teenage girls that have a collection of makeup, and it is arranged, and they've got the full range of a particular brand, or, they need to have the latest thing in that brand. And
and a collection of different colours of the same. And I suppose it's about that outward behaviour that you think, well, okay, we can see that, but we can't necessarily see someone's makeup bag, or whether it's bothering them internally. And I think you've got to ask questions, particularly of women. What does that feel like for you? Or quite often we ask parents, do they do this? Do they do that? It's very behavioural. And I think in the spirit of candour and being open, I think one of the things that I've discovered lately is that I've got ADHD, and I never knew. And I have not told many people, and I might as well just get it out there and be in allegiance with you, Alexandra, because there is a stigma, and I feel like I will be absolutely judged for saying it. And I won't be. I know I won't be, really deep down, by anyone who cares about me. But there is that naughty kid. You can't have ADHD because you weren't the really naughty boy in the classroom. But I think, looking back, I can think of loads of things that I did that absolutely were screaming ADHD all the way through my life. And it does make you feel stupid, and it makes you feel people are looking at you in a different way. So just stand up next to you there and in allegiance with you, Alexandra, because you don't have to stand there alone and say these things. But also, I think, something stopped me saying it to people, and some of the responses I've had when I have shared it have been, well, yeah, we all have, haven't we? Or yeah, I think I probably have. Or well, lots of people have, and it's the menopause, and yeah, the menopause strips you of all ability to manage it. That's the problem. And I spend a lot of time now just in absolute total chaos, because I have no idea what I'm doing. So I've got my little lists and everything. And people, one of the things about the DSM is, do talk about, I think a lot of parents have said to me lately, well, what level is my child? And the DSM 2013 onwards lists 3 levels of autism you can have. One is like you don't really need support. One is that you need a bit of support. And one is that you need significant support. Well, that can depend where you are, what time of day it is, who's around you, what room you're in, how you're feeling day to day, what you did yesterday, what you did last week. There's no such thing as a level of support overall. It can vary and be so internal, because people might not need any support, but be absolutely, totally and utterly overwhelmed by how they feel that day based on the neurodivergence and what the world's throwing at them and expectations of them. You know, if I look at my email list, I need a lot of support, significant support to deal with my waiting emails, but no one would say I need any support.
No.
You know, it's not that, that's a different category, but, you know, it's not overt, it's not obvious, is it, that things are going on, particularly for women, that are not behaviour. They're just in there or in here and are absolutely debilitating.
Yeah.
And
And I think that's why we
anyway.
see a lot of people at transition times in life. So when children have made the move from primary to secondary school, or when GCSEs are approaching, or when people have left school and gone on to university, or have finished university and kind of going into the world of work, all of those times are when demands on people change and expectations
Or a
of people
family,
change. Yeah, or
or
had
a
families.
parent,
Yeah, and
or
then suddenly those support structures or familiarity of ways of being or expectations have been stripped away or taken, and somebody suddenly presents as really struggling at life, when perhaps they may have always had some difficulties, but they haven't been so overt or so obvious. Or, you know, as children and teenagers grow into adults, are much more able to articulate their experiences and have more awareness of perhaps what's going on for them that's different to their friends or their peers or other people their age. And so people present for a diagnosis at those times, or present for some help because they don't know what's going on. And perhaps we're in a similar position to you, Alexandra, where life wasn't working out for them, and they wanted an answer, and that's all people are looking for. I think, you know, people are judged for seeking a diagnosis as if this is some kind of excuse or some kind of shortcut to an easy life, and it isn't that. And I could hand on heart say it's people wanting an answer and an explanation, and needing to know for their sanity and for their well-being.
Yeah, it's absolutely that. Yeah, and I think people definitely think, oh, well, life's just not working out for you, so you've gone and got a diagnosis, which gives you a reason, rather than you've just failed, you're just not good enough. Like, oh, no, because I can tell you 10 times over, I would rather have just been able to be getting on with my life and doing things I wanted to do. And I don't think people think that. I don't think people realise that it's not just like you just decide one day, oh, I can't be bothered, I'll just go and get diagnosed with something instead, because it's quite distressing to have a diagnosis. In lots of ways, we go deeper into in my diary, I expect. And it's not the easy option. It's absolutely terrifying that all of your best efforts aren't working, that you're watching everybody else just function and just do it, and you're sitting there trying but not doing it. And again, this is why we want to speak about it and bring other people in to speak about it too. You know, say, no, this isn't taken on lightly by people. This isn't just a get out of jail free card. It's really, really hard, on top of all of the difficulty we've already gone through. Because I think there's a massive thing that when you've been undiagnosed for so long as well, you don't know what is you masking or what isn't your masking. You just know you probably have certain coping mechanisms. And I think what happens when you have those transitional times, like you're saying, you're quite right. Those are absolutely the moments where it just takes away your comfort blanket suddenly and goes, right, you're doing all of this without a comfort blanket now, because suddenly you've gone over your threshold of what you can cope with, and things have just gone up another level or changed in some way, whether that's hormones or environment, whatever it is. And you're just suddenly doing everything without a comfort blanket. and it's harder. It is like having something ripped away from you and feeling really wobbly, because you've managed before, you've had your little ways before, and it just tips. It's a balance that tips. And I think that that's obviously why it's different for everybody. And Lesley, I think, first of all, I really appreciate you standing next to me in that way and announcing that, because that's, I know how that feels, and that's a lot. And especially with what you do, it's incredibly brave, because, you know, we're talking exactly about how much people don't understand right now. But actually, if they can understand, look, you can be qualified in this, you can see this day in, day out, and still not necessarily look at yourself in that way or recognize those things in that way, because your head's just down and you're getting on. But actually, you reach a stage in life where something changes and it then all starts to fall into place and it makes sense. All that says to me, more than anything, how much we need to keep on doing what we're doing, because I think, you know, there'll be people listening now who potentially are still to have a child or go through a change or reach another stage in life where they might find this applies a lot more than they thought it would. I think, you know, there's a lot of people that it's more applicable to than they might know. But it's all that balance, and how much we say it's about environment. It's not about having an inherent deficit. I think it proves that more than anything, that it's not that you're not a capable person. I've seen incredibly successful friend of mine, and she's always thought she might have ADHD, but never enough that it would be problematic with it. She'd seek a diagnosis. And again, I don't think people need to seek diagnosis. If they think it, or even if they know, but it's not problematic to them, that's fine. You don't have to do that. We're not trying to label everybody. It's whatever helps anybody.
And I think one of the things that key is the diagnostic criteria for ADHD and autism. You have to have a problem with it. So to have a formal diagnosis, it has to be a problem, which takes away that whole layer of people who actually do experience the same kind of difficulties or differences, but actually just getting on with it and getting on okay because they've set their life up really well, or they've got the support around them in terms of work. They might have a PA or somebody who just happens to be supporting them in lots of ways around their executive function, or they might just have a really close supportive family. Or not everyone has a problem, do they? Not everyone's asking for money or support. It's just saying, yeah, this is how my brain works. I've got to work blooming hard to keep up with what's going on. And sometimes it's harder and sometimes it's not.
I think what you just said there, even the language and tripping up with it, of actually, no, not everybody does have difficulties with it. It is differences, and that isn't always an issue. And I think if we can recognize that there is this whole strand of human beings, genetics and DNA in the population that function differently, and it's all at varying degrees, and it's all, everyone's got different tipping points, and that's where we're differing on that spectrum. It's more the tipping point than the nature of the person themselves. Then doesn't that also increase the argument of, if we just make the environment open to everybody and work for everybody, then people won't have to do something and go and be medicalized when they reach a tipping point? I think that's what we're trying to say, isn't it? Is it's not medicalizing it because it's not problematic or something that does need support and does need understanding. It's the fact that it's only medicalized at the moment with legal iterations and all sorts attached to that, because there's no other way that we understand it or provide for it in society right now. But if society provided an environment that's more conducive to the different minds. I saw it the other day, a brilliant example of, you've probably heard this, the pavement, dipped pavement. Basically, we have a dip in the pavement, don't we, for driveways or in town where you're crossing and things. And that originally came about for wheelchair users or mobility scooters, and people with prams find it useful. People with suitcases, and a million times running around London for work, suitcases and things, it's useful. It's useful all round for so many things. It's useful when you want to pull in and you shouldn't and drop your friend off. It's just a really useful, handy thing that came about because of disability, that came about as an accessible remedy for what people would say is a minority of people, yet it helps the majority. And it's just being inclusive by design in everything we do. And does that mean at the minute changing things up hugely? Yes. And we can do it step by step. It doesn't all have to be at once. But if we can move towards doing these things differently, then for all the reasons we've just said, we're not wanting to scream, shout and talk about this forever, just like the homosexuality ordeal those people went through and what they had to fight. We want to fight now to also just be able to be left in peace, to be ourselves and to function. I don't want attention. I don't want constant conversations and to ask for this and to ask for that. I don't want to have to do it. It's mortifying. It's horrible having to ask for anything. So I think that's ultimately what we're saying throughout all of this, isn't it? Is, you know, at the minute, we have this diagnostic process, which I will let you continue to describe in a minute. But these are all of the things behind it, aren't they? And what you're saying, I suppose I'm just picking up on that, is all of these points throughout the diagnosis system itself tell us and are giving us cues about what we need to do, aren't they, to make it different.
Yeah, and I suppose if you look at it in the context of the social model of disability, which has been around a long time, the pavement being flattened is an example of where you can see there's an impairment there. Someone has an impairment, but they're disabled by the way society's set up, the pavement not being dipped. And the way to support that is to dip the pavements. Yeah, it costs money, but over time, things have got a lot easier. There's ramps everywhere. There's automatic doors. So people with that, the impairment that maybe results in them being a wheelchair user, means they can get around a lot easier. Still not brilliant, but it's getting better. And the understanding's there, I think, because it's so obvious that somebody cannot get up the stairs. Whereas high neurodivergent people, it's not obvious. Most people don't really say anything. And there's assumptions there because it's not obvious, it's not concrete, it's not clear what's going on for someone. And sometimes people don't know what's going on for themselves. So what can we do to make it better? I think that's a really, really common question asked of children, for example, from staff who are saying, well, you know, what can we do to make it better? And very often children just don't know. I don't know what it is about this place, but it makes me feel terrified. What can we do about it? Well, I don't know. But, you know, this is what we're talking about. It can be lots of things. And I think perhaps in my mind, there's things that we can change individually as people to support neurodivergence in our day-to-day lives. Small things, kindness, compassion and nurture to people, and understanding that they might be neurodivergent. They're not being difficult on purpose. Maybe this is where it's coming from. And there are things that we can do as systems in society that are much bigger, that as individual people or members of society or workers or whatever we do, we can't change because the systems are broken or the systems are underfunded. Some things we just can't do anything about, but there's stuff we can all do that involves kindness. And I think that's, if we've got that as a starting point, that can make a massive difference to somebody on the receiving end of it. I suppose that's what we're trying to advocate.
We have it quite a lot, particularly with parents. They're often saying, I don't know how to help them, or we don't know what we're doing. But then when you listen to how they've set up family life, they've just so naturally adapted and they don't realise it. And I think sometimes what we're doing is connecting up the dots for people and recognising what they're already doing, putting words to what they're already doing. That, you know, they make sure they prepare dinner in a certain way, or they don't force the child to eat certain food, or a spouse might provide a lot of reassurance to somebody and thinking that they're somehow not helping or not doing enough to help that person, but they're already doing. It's just so innate to the way that they exist as a family or as a couple or as a person that they don't.
That's what they're doing. The parent that does get it intuitively and helps the other parent who might not have been getting it go, okay, now I officially can't contribute to the problem, and was contributing to the problem a bit, because God bless my dad, I was fine with vegetables, but in bubble and sweet corn, I wasn't okay when the sprouts were involved with that, and I'm still not, thank you. But he would not accept that I was not being stubborn. Whereas if he knew, no, the reason why she's gagging like she's going to be physically sick and crying isn't because this is a challenge. That's something she can't tolerate. And I think sprouts are intolerable to quite a lot of people. But again, like, I had to make it so niche it didn't really stand out as anything, didn't I? But if that was something that was across a much wider range of food, or was as a reaction to something else which most children would cope with, say that the sensory differences getting dressed that got that reaction, or things like that. If one parent was saying, no, you need to just persist in this, that, and the other, and then one parent was thinking, no, that's not right, something's not right, at least the diagnosis would help the person who wasn't getting it understand, oh, okay, this isn't a challenging behaviour. This is a response and a legitimate and controllable one to this sensory input to them. So it does just help that understanding. And I think there's something as well, if anybody's wondering why cheese on toast and a mini dog has appeared, we had a little lunch break. But we're working through. But we all have mugs and food, and my dog's elsewhere. But we have Minnie. Introduce you to Minnie.
Minnie's only here for the look of that,
watching.
staring out the teas.
Just
trying to make it levitate up.
Something actually to say which was so helpful to me, because it's a really, really good point you've raised, Lesley, is that you don't know the help you need. So it's all fine saying, well, I know I need support. I'm just quite needy sometimes. Sometimes I just need someone there for me, just to speak to, just to have a hug, just need some reassurance. That's often one of my greatest needs. But beyond that, both of you as the professionals, when I came down to an event, Lesley, you sent me over an email, and I've gone my entire life being absolutely fine, going to a train station and walking to wherever I am using Google Maps, and I get on with it and it's fine. I didn't know how absolutely lovely it is having someone having gone through and put pictures of what your journey is going to look like. And yes, I still was using my maps and stuff, but I also had the visual reference of, you'll be coming down this street, or you need to look out for this. And it just made it so easy. It was suddenly like having a cheat code. And it's things like that, because that was then really funny when I was working on a film production, and an amazing Hollywood editor and director I was privileged to work with, he was obviously frustrated in the format we were doing it. In Hollywood, obviously, there's all these amazing teams that are putting these sorts of things together. You have call sheets, which have all your information. And then what we didn't have, which you usually have, would be exactly what you'd done for me. And it made me laugh when he was describing it. He said, you know, if you look at this, we'd usually have a picture of the entrance. And I just sat there and just thought, that's so funny. The creative industry doesn't even know that they're automatically catering to the creative mind, of which lots will be neurodivergent, and doing those things. Like, even the call sheet just has, it's got your coordinates, it's got your what 3 words, it's got your weather for that day, which is really nice to know, given I struggle with regulating my temperature. It was so well set up for neurodivergence, but just naturally. And it just shows how much is already out there and helpful. But that they don't know that's helping lots of the people that'll be working with them. And I didn't know that that's something I found helpful until you, who do know, had just given that to me without asking and saying, do you need it? Because if you said, I'd be like, no, I'm great at finding places. But was it nicer? God, yeah. And there'll be so many tricks up people's sleeves of people who do help people with autism and ADHD that know all of these things that'll help us. But when we're late diagnosed and we've just got our own ways of doing these things, we won't have reached out for this support or that support to do them, and won't have thought what would be helpful. So being actually given it is really important. And then you can pick if you need it or not. But having that helps so much, and just probably preserves a tiny bit of energy, but every bit is precious. So great, thank you. I'll have that energy from that. And
that's a
also,
point, actually.
yeah, and it means you can focus on what you're supposed to be focusing on, because the difficulty of having a job for me wasn't the job. It was getting to and from and being exhausted and having done all of those menial things which really zap neurodivergent energy. And then I couldn't do the job as well and thrive at that or stick at that, because the other stuff had driven my energy, which is pointless, really. So yeah, the information and knowledge you will have to be able to depart to us is an important part of knowing who you are and what will be helpful as well. But you need guidance.
Yeah, but I think what we try to do when we're doing an assessment is kind of interweave all of those things all together. I think we very often will start by saying, this is the story of you. We're here to hear about how your life has been up until this point. You know, we'll need to know certain things and certain questions and certain areas of your life that we might ask more about and inquire about. But actually, that assessment can be informed by that person's unique experiences in the world and how those have impacted on them and what traumatic experience they might have gone through, or what successes and parts of life that have gone well for them, and kind of inquiring about why that is. I suppose we're very curious about people, but I think through those conversations then we start to unpick what has helped that person or what has been supportive of them. And we kind of interweave that then with our knowledge. So yes, the appointment will end with us giving an opinion, whether somebody meets that diagnostic threshold or not. But we hope that through that process, somebody has discovered more about themselves, or a parent has discovered more about their child, but also started to recognise all those things that are already happening that have helped, and why those things were helpful, so that you can replicate that and do more of those things, rather than it just being a process of focusing on all the negatives or the trauma and everything else. That it isn't to diminish that, but people have created their own solutions, they've found their own ways, and we can add to that, we can complement that, but we don't purport to dictate to people how they live their life. We try and support them to do more of the things that work for them already.
I think that's why it'd be a process of therapeutic work as well as an assessment at the same time, if you do it in that way, because you're just allowing someone to tell the story for the first time sometimes. And it's about saying, well, what was it like for you? Not, do you have this deficit? Do you have this deficit? And I think sometimes that's how people experience it. But I think me and Gail try and push the extent of the diagnostic criteria as far as we can in terms of how we deliver our conversation, or how we deliver the questions, so it doesn't become a tick box exercise. I remember going out to see a family years ago, and the dad turned around and said to me and Gail, well, you're just basically ticking a few boxes, aren't you? Then you find out whether someone's autistic or not. I thought, well, I suppose it's both basic level, yeah, but actually it's how you find that information that's really important, and how respectfully you do it, and also how you kind of elicit the information that people might not know they've got. One of the fundamental difficulties with diagnostic assessments is that you're asking parents about the child, whether they do unusual things, and their parents say no, that's not unusual, when it is, but they don't know because they're neurodivergent too. And I think that we have a lot of that kind of penny dropping, that is unusual. It's not peculiar like it might have been in 1952 in the DSM. Or bizarre, or yeah, but it's different. And I think a lot of the whole system of diagnosis it just makes me profoundly uncomfortable. I think me and Gail I think the reason we really enjoy working outside of statutory services is because we now have the privilege of being able to shift the way we do it in a way that doesn't feel medical. We try our best to have a conversation rather than a kind of question answer. Do you do this? Do you do this? Especially for
not an interrogation, is it?
No,
I
Hopefully not.
remember in my assessment with you both, I would say, and again, it's actually probably a bit of a learning point because it's not something associated with autistic people, but is a trait of mine, is that I'm usually very good at picking up on, well, I have a huge interest in psychology, so I can usually sort of anticipate where something's going or what you're trying to get at, but it wasn't like that. It was such a calm conversation. And, I think based on the people you're dealing with, who lots of us do carry a lot of trauma, you do make it very just calm and a safe space. And you can tell that that's your priority rather than, getting through these questions you've got to, run through and get the answers to. It's not like that at all. It is a conversation. I feel like you're both very respectful of the fact that it's also deeply personal. Now, I'm a massive open book, so I'd imagine it was slightly easier. But it didn't feel like I had to answer all of your questions because that's what I was there for. And it felt like a conversation. And I suppose that's quite an art because then you are putting people at ease, you are letting them be themselves. And I remember in my report reading things that you were observing and I had no idea about, even how I drank or how I moved or fidgeted or, things like that. My hands obviously come up quite a lot. And yeah, I think there will absolutely be people, maybe even listening, who are thinking, God, what's all this about? Who would be much like that parent that spoke to you and said, oh, this is just a box ticking exercise. And obviously there's been a lot of criticism in the media as well about how diagnosis is done and, the validity of private practice versus NHS. But I think absolutely what you're saying of it's the person and it's not a checklist, the person's your priority. That was absolutely felt. And that was really helpful for me to be able to show you myself in my most natural form without thinking about it as well, and that obviously helps you do a hell of a better assessment because it's likely I did display little leakages of anxiety or things I might have had. Leakages. But it's that's really
and I think that's the other thing for me about kind of doing an assessment. So we use the ADOS assessment, and I think Lesley and I would have a lot to say, as do a lot of professionals that work in the field of diagnostics, around the ADOS assessment, and there's lots of faults with it. But I think part of what the ADOS does is creates a set of scenarios in order for us to be able to observe how somebody interacts and communicates and responds to situations that they haven't been able to practice or are completely novel or just downright weird. And then there's a set of criteria that you're looking for or that you might observe as part of that. And the way that it's described within the ADOS assessment is of a disorder or a deficit. But we also try not to get sucked into that way of talking and describing somebody. As you say, Alexandra, making observations about somebody's communication that are different, that have an impact on their relationships and their interactions with people, because it's important for that person to know that might be what's causing communication breakdown to happen or relationship difficulties to happen because of something that's different about their communication. But I think more importantly, it's for the people around them to know that actually conversations can be difficult because that person needs you to say, ask more questions or to scaffold that conversation a lot more. They need support with initiating and telling you things, or actually asking for help or asking a question to clarify is really difficult for that person. And that can come out in the ADOS. We can see that in the ADOS, that somebody might not immediately be able to report, or a parent might not be able to report on behalf of their child, but we can see that in the assessment and write that down and make that clear. And that then helps that person and those around them to adapt to that and find ways of managing that. So yes, it's a flawed assessment, and we would probably choose not to do it if that would be helpful to people. But again, I guess we go back to this thing of, we're stuck at that medical model of diagnosis where the expectation is actually for anybody in the health services, in local authorities, in education, to take what we're doing seriously and accept it as a valid assessment. We have to use these published assessments that exist. So whether that be the DISCO, a detailed developmental history, alongside the ADOS, or doing an ADIR, or one of those other published assessments, if you're not using those assessments, then you run the risk of them being dismissed because it's not a valid assessment, because it doesn't meet the NICE criteria. It's not the gold standard of assessment. So it's kind of that self-perpetuating cycle that we don't agree with those tools necessarily, but they're a necessary evil almost to get the answer for people and to open up those doors of support and to get those diagnoses accepted and verified.
Being stuck between a rock and a hard place of needing something and that's what you've got, but is it ideal? Not necessarily. But it's what we've got to work with now, and hopefully we can encourage and keep looking at what alternatives are coming around and how we can change it moving forward.
That is all for today. Thank you so much for joining us. Hope you come back next time. Please follow or subscribe so that you don't miss a thing. And if you'd like even more of us, you can go over to www.maskingforit.com and find more episodes and blogs on our website, which get into some nitty-gritty detail, because we do love that. And you can also get in touch with us if there's something that we haven't covered, or you have any questions, or something about your experience that you'd like to share. Then please send that to us via email. Is contact@maskingforit.com, or any of our socials, which are @maskingforitpodcast. We'd love to hear from you, and thank you so much for being here as we bring the conversation out to the real big world to see if we can change it just that little bit. Thank you so much for being a part of it, and we'll see you next time.